Hello, everybody. Okay, that was a bold way to start the conversation that we're about to have, but welcome back to Lila the podcast. I am Alexa. I am your host. I am not a singer, clearly, but I do like to throw in a little jingle every now and then. But I am so happy that you've tuned in again, or if you're new here, welcome to the podcast. I started Lila by Alexa Joe. That used to be just a blog, and then I branched out and did an event and want to continue to do events, and now I have the podcast. And usually I'm joined by another guest, somebody that's either someone cool I met while traveling or someone great from home. And everyone has a little piece to share, either about their story or their experience with one thing or another. But today I actually wanted to ride solo. And that was actually pretty intentional. I just wanted to do a little mental health check-in because me personally, my mental health has been a little bit of a struggle lately. And I feel like mental health has almost become a buzzword in a way. And I guess maybe that's a good thing because we're talking about Mental Health Awareness Month a little bit, but almost in a way that I feel like people don't necessarily know that there's a difference between, okay, everybody has mental health, like everybody has physical health. You might have good physical health, bad physical health, good mental health, bad mental health, but not everybody has mental illness. And Mental Health Awareness Month is really important because even 10 years ago when I was younger, and I guess I first really started experiencing troubles with my own mental health probably more like 15 years ago when I was 9 years old. Start 'em young, they say. But I was extremely scared, and there wasn't nearly any kind of education out there or awareness, and it was definitely a lot more tucked away. Like, even, oh my gosh, you guys, I have been obsessed with the show Reba lately. A single mom who works 2 jobs. Yeah, that's the one. If you didn't know where that song was from, it's from Reba the sitcom, and it's so good. It's like, if you haven't seen it, then you need to watch it. What do I watch it on? I think I watch it on Hulu, but I think it's on other things too. And anyway, so I was just watching this part in the show that, yeah, see, it's hard if you don't watch a show, but basically there's a couple and they're married, and the husband has been like having a hard time lately, and he goes on antidepressants, and the wife like wants to separate because she's like, well, if me and our son aren't enough for you, then like, I just don't know what to tell you. And she took it so like personally offensively that he was on these antidepressants. And I'm like, wow, if that was just in the early 2000s, wait, I don't know when Reba was definitely the early 2000s. I don't know what year, but then we've really come a long way. And I guess maybe some people feel that way, but I'm here to help you understand that, like, people that are going through troubles with mental illness, it's not necessarily because like you can't fix them, you can't make them happy enough. Like, there's literally problems, imbalances, chemical differences in the brain and outside factors. And yeah, maybe there are some, like, you know, toxic or harmful or abusive relationships that can cause people to have troubles with their mental health or lead to mental illnesses. But that doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, you aren't enough, you're not making someone happy enough. And so I'm really happy that there's things like Mental Health Awareness Month, just because even in the past few years, I feel like we've gotten so much more aware. And by like, okay, so I'm going to be 25 this month. I know, don't mention it. I'm not happy about it. I'm still a 16-year-old girl in my head. So this is a little bit crazy. But 1999 to 2024, the math does add up. 25 big ones at the end of this month. But anyway, I digress. At the beginning of college, I had just been prescribed antidepressants, and I remember being super embarrassed about it. I didn't know if I wanted to take them. Admittedly, yeah, I'm big enough to admit it's because I knew that when I went to college, I was going to want to engage in a little drinking. And I knew you weren't supposed to drink on antidepressants, which sounds so like stupid and crazy, because it's like, okay, well, girl, you literally wanted to unalive yourself. So I feel like that should have been more important, but so is my social health. I don't know. Anyway, I just like wasn't really aware. I felt like I had to come to this like complete breaking point where I was like, I literally can't go another day. And, I'm not a psychiatrist. I do have a bachelor's in psychology, but that makes me qualified for just about nothing. It means I know a couple theories. But I'm not really qualified to diagnose, which I want to make clear. I'm not telling you you have anything. I'm just sharing my own experience. But at the beginning of college, I remember feeling super embarrassed for like anyone to know or anything. And then I found out that actually a lot of other people were on them. But then by the end of college, it was like we literally did a big year or semester project on a mental health campaign for children and adolescents in one of my classes. And I think that was one thing that the pandemic brought was a lot more awareness about mental health for everybody, because a lot of people that have never experienced any troubles in that area before were experiencing those things because life just changed so drastically. And I'm sad for people that have felt so like, I'm speaking in a way that's directed towards depression specifically, just because that's the one that plagues my life the most. But, there's a whole DSM-5. The DSM-5 is a big manual. It's like freaking huge. And it's all of what does it even stand for? Let me look this up. What's the DSM-5, which I should know as a psych student graduate? Oh, duh, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. You didn't even know that. I can't believe you didn't know that, everybody else. You should have known that. The author is the American Psychiatric Association. So basically, this baby is thick. So when I'm talking about mental illness, and I have a few, I've got my own little punch card. I'm waiting for another one till I can get my free smoothie. But or my free something. I don't know. I feel like if you get a certain amount, you should start getting something for free. Maybe healthcare. That'd be cool. That'd be nice. But basically, I just feel like people are recognizing it a lot more. It's becoming more of a conversation. It's becoming so much more normalized. And people are like, oh, I need to prioritize my mental health. But at the same time, I think that there's more education that needs to be done. And sharing our own stories can just be so helpful, because like if I would have had people at certain times in my life, if I would have been able to like look to somebody that was sharing their story or sharing how they got out of it and everything, like that could have been my survival guide. And so I'm hoping that I can be someone else's survival guide, because I just know that would have made such a big difference for me. But I'm just going to keep trucking through until that happens. But I hope that this reaches the person, whoever it needs to know that it's tough. It's tough out here. And I'm going to actually even tell you guys about my own mental illnesses. I know it's crazy. I usually I talk about my own. But a lot of times on this podcast is about, the other person and their experiences. And I just felt like maybe people should get to know the host a little bit more, And it is May, and I wanted to direct more of my content around mental health, because that was something that like I really started it on, and it's been so much about travel lately, which is super fun, but I really want to get back to the root of like why it's important to be living a worthwhile life. And while travel is a part of my desires now, living a worthwhile life is what this whole thing is about, purely, authentically, wholeheartedly you, and striving for these Lila moments, which actually I can't believe I've gotten this far into the episode without once again telling you what Lila means. Lila is a wholehearted contentedness upon the recognition that every happenstance in one's life has led to this very moment in this very place with these very people. It's warm, it's safe, and it just feels like this is what life is all about. That's what a Lila moment is. And I'm in the pursuit of sharing the word, sharing the meaning, and creating a movement, and seeing how Lila touches other people's lives. And so I did a whole episode about it last week if you want to go check that out. And back to this episode again. But essentially, May is a perfect month for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I know that it feels like we have like a different observance every month, this day, that day. Like literally you can look up national month observances and there's like 15 a day. And some of them are very fun, but this is important. And it's, yeah, anyway. But yeah, so May is a symbol of new beginnings. Spring, it's in full swing at this point. The sun is shining, the temperatures sit at a perfect 65 to 75 degrees, and everything becomes green again. I tell you, I miss the green so much. The lakes, they're flowing again, they're no longer frozen over. And we start seeing a lot of those flowers. And one of the flowers that we will see in May is the lily of the valley. They only bloom in May, and their bloom life is very short, but they're the cutest, sweetest, dainty flowers. And if you can't picture one, just go look at the Lila logo. Those white flowers are lilies of the valley. It's a symbol of purity, joy, love, luck, and happiness. In fact, they actually mean the return of happiness. And I have it as a tattoo, which I got when I was 18 after coming out of a pretty big depressive episode, which I'll get into later. And that's part of why it's a logo, or that's part of why it's in my logo, and it's a symbol of my brand. And it's also the birth flower of May, which is both my birth month and Lila's birth month. And I'm really hoping May starts kicking in with some of its new beginnings magic, because ironically, during Mental Health Awareness Month and spring, which is my favorite season, I am not doing so well in the mental health department. And, I've been seeing a lot of angel numbers lately, which I do believe in. I've been seeing, all of them, 333, 222, 555, a lot of 555. That means change is coming. The other day I saw 777. I'm just seeing them all the time, every day. So I'm like, what is waiting for me? So I feel like I don't want to give up right now, but I feel like I do. And that's part of why the mental health department for me is not doing so well. Outside of, I have a lot of other things going on in my personal life, but definitely with the work life, I feel like it's really hard to come to this brand and create content and social media about mental health when I don't feel well. And I know that being off social media is good for my mental health, but I know that being consistent and building a presence online is good for my brand and what I'm trying to build here. And I could keep talking, but I'm just going to spiral and spiral and spiral. And I always want to show up authentically, and doing some episode with a guest talking about triumph over mental illness and looking at it in hindsight just didn't feel authentic to me this week because, well, I feel like I'm struggling right now. And not to the depths of what I felt before, nowhere near that actually, but I am doing these temp checks lately, which is what I call it. I just take a second and I'm like, okay, temp check. How am I actually doing? Like, am I going through the motions of the day right now? Let's take some time to be introspective and just look in and be like, okay, what are some patterns that I'm picking up on here that maybe have been an indicator of a mental illness dip in the past? Like, oh, I'm falling into a depression, which I feel like I'm so much more capable of catching now than I have been in the past. But I'm noticing some of those signs for me, and yeah, I'm just trying to do these temp checks and just trying to reevaluate, like, hey, am I actually doing okay? I've been sleeping in late and staying up late and starting a lot of tasks and not finishing them. Shout out to my laundry that was in the dryer for 3 days last week. And just really scatterbrained and generally blah, like not excited about what I'm doing. And that's the hard thing about trying to start something, especially as a creative, because the drive to build and grow and gain traction can take the joy out of it. So I'm really in a tough place right now where I need to reevaluate what I'm doing. And of course, there's other things outside work that are weighing me down a lot mentally, but I don't like to talk about those things publicly until they're in the rearview mirror and I can protect everyone involved, because, like, while my mission is always to share my own story, it's never to villainize anybody else. And unfortunately, sometimes people in my stories do actually suck. And so it's hard because even if they've done me wrong, I still want to, like, protect them and their dignity and recognize that I'm saying this on a platform where we're only hearing my side of the story. So I just like to be really careful about that and make sure that I don't say something that I will regret, like something out of hurt or frustration or sadness. And, in the past, I have, like, posted on social media when I really wasn't doing well, and it just kind of blew up in my face, and it didn't read well. It wasn't getting the message across that I wanted it to. It was like kind of a cry for help. And it just kind of ended up making people shy away instead. So I like to be careful about that. But I always want to wait to talk about things until they're in the rearview mirror and I can look at the situation in hindsight. But what I do want to about today is my journey with mental health and uncovering mental illnesses and why this awareness is so important to me. Because if I would have had the tools back then, maybe it wouldn't have been so hard, like I said before. So let's take it all the way back to childhood. And don't worry, we're not getting into the nitty gritty because that's what we have a whole podcast about. This comes out in different episodes, different guests, different stories. Look, we can't talk about all of my life story because first of all, I will get the worst. Can we even call it anxiety if I haven't had any alcohol? But like after posting it, I will get way too anxious about it if I just share that much about my life. We don't need to get into all of the nitty gritty. Anyway, so let's take it all the way back to childhood. Growing up, I was in a pretty, like in the early years, it was like a pretty solid home as far as I remember. And we had it really good, like we got to be in whatever sports and activities we wanted. And, we had a cabin on a lake, which used to be my parents' old house until, they had another kid and couldn't live there, but they were able to keep the property. And I recognized that we were so like fortunate to have that. But I know that, I feel like as early as I can remember, I always remember feeling like a sadness and insecurity in me. And I don't know exactly how young that dates, but I know that when I started to really, really struggle was when I was about 9. And coincidentally, now I'm not saying correlation equals causation, but I'm not saying it. My stats teacher from high school would disagree. He would always say that it is not. Correlation is not equal to causation, but I don't know. This looks pretty related to me. Anyway, my parents got divorced and separated, and that was very hard. And me and my siblings have quite a big age gap. I have a sibling who is 10 years older than me, one that's 5 years older than me, and one that's 2.5 years younger than me. And so besides me and my little brother, like we were all kind of raised in like different eras of my parents' lives and parenthood. You know what I mean? So I feel like me and my brother growing up really had the same experience, whereas like the difference between us and our 2 older siblings were different. And like those 2 older siblings' experiences were different too. And so that definitely like paved the way for certain things throughout the rest of our lives as far as like living with our parents and their divorce really affecting us. Now we're all adults, so it's like, it affects us on holidays. But it's been a solid 15 years. Like I think that we can move past it. But anyway, and so I remember actually the first time I remember super struggling, like that was really hard. I think that was like a deep sadness and misunderstanding and feeling of loss after that. And I know that parents are able to co-parent beautifully these days. And like, I don't want to ever shit on that. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I know that given my experience growing up in a divorced home, like I'll do everything I possibly can to not have that be the case for my children, just because like, yes, we're, overall we became happy people, but like it just sucked, and it's not something that I wish for people. And I know that people that do that I'm sure they tried everything that they possibly could with their partner. So I guess I'm just kind of going on a tangent, but all I'm saying is, yes, it is as bad as it seems. And it's actually mind-boggling to me because when people are like, oh yeah, my parents are still together, I like actually can't comprehend that. I like can't wrap my head around people whose parents are still in love. I'm so sorry to my parents if you're listening to this, but honestly, like I just can't, because that's just never been the case for me. Like that's never been something that I've had, as far as like, yes, when I was really young, but I don't remember that as much as I remember them not being compatible after. For the majority of my life, they've not been together. So that was when I first started feeling the most like abnormal sadness that I think like was not addressed, because I didn't know that it was like, I knew it was the worst sadness I've ever felt. I knew it was the heaviest, but I didn't know that meant that there was like an issue that needed to be solved. I just thought like, our family's going through a lot. And my parents during this time, they were really distracted they had a really messy divorce and separation. And so there was a lot of distraction at that time. And they were both going through a lot. And so I felt very alone and had to try and figure a lot of things out by myself, and like both physically alone and like mentally alone. But I was so young, I didn't really know what that meant. And so my struggles with mental health really started when I was probably about 9 years old. And so that's part of why like I hold this so dearly, is I just think about when I see a 9-year-old kid and I think like, oh my God, I can't believe that's how little I was when this started. Like I can't fathom that. That breaks my heart. And how we're seeing it so much more now because like kids are chronically online, and that is just a whole other rabbit hole that we're not going to dive into. But also, so I don't know if I really had like a full-on depression at that point. I don't really remember. There's a lot of things that are like straight up blacked out about that time period of my life, because that's called trauma. But we also had a house fire. And nothing like crazy burned down. Like there was some damage to our kitchen, I think, but just like the trauma, being the one that saw the fire, called the fire department, had to like scoop up my brother and run outside and wait in the car, like while my mom is trying to tame it until the firefighters get there. Like that was a huge trigger for anxiety. And that's when my anxiety disorder began. And at the time I called it worried. I was always worried. I'm up late worrying. And I would not sleep the entire night. And I would be super, super scared to be the last one awake in the house, because I was scared something would happen and I'd be the one that had to fix it. Or somebody would break into the house and I'd be the one awake and I'd have to do something. But I was like paralyzed with fear because when the fire happened, I felt like paralyzed with fear. And so then I was scared that any like traumatic event would happen and I'd be the only one that noticed it. I'd be the only one that was aware. And yeah, so I started getting like just horrible anxiety from that age, but we just called it my worrying. Oh, she's up late worrying. Alexa's worrying. And so there wasn't a diagnosis at that point, and I really don't think there was a diagnosis until I was in high school. But then again, in middle school, when I was 13, I remember also, like, I just remember there was a summer day that I was crying and crying and crying. I couldn't stop crying, and I didn't know what I was crying about. I just knew that I was so sad. And that kind of breaks my heart now, because I misunderstood my own feelings, and I felt so misunderstood by everyone else because nobody knew why I was so sad, and neither did I. And I now know it's because I have depression. And that's why I was so sad and like didn't want to be alive. But when you're that young, you don't understand what that means. Like nobody else around me had felt that, and it was really isolating, and I really didn't feel like I had like close friends at that point in my life. And so that was just like, that was the first real full-blown depression that I remember. Now, in hindsight, I feel like potentially it could have been when I was a little bit younger, like right when my parents first told us they were getting divorced. But I also like straight up don't remember that time of my life much. And so I don't know, maybe I still had the buoyancy of a kid mentally. Is that even a right term? So the first full-blown depression I remember having was in middle school when I was 13 in 7th grade. And that lasted a long time, and I was really sad and unhappy and just felt like I was trying to figure out who I was in the world, but didn't have a strong sense of that, of like grounding. And that was really hard. And so then I actually transferred school districts in 9th grade, which I think a lot of people thought it was because I moved, but it was also a personal choice. I made sure that my dad moved into a district that I could go to a specific school in. So it wasn't just because my parents got divorced and moved. It was also a personal choice. And it was probably one of the better choices I've ever made because those friends that I made at that school are my best friends today. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And I remember like my dad not understanding why I wanted to go to that school so bad. And I did know a couple people there already. That's why I wanted to go to that school. But I remember just being like, I just know that's where I need to go. Like, I just know that this isn't right. And I know that that is. And that was my intuition. I feel so proud of young me for following my intuition, even though it was hard. And okay, my dad was going to move anyway. I didn't like make him move. But, what was he? Dad, were you? Dad, are you listening? I think I told him not to listen. But yeah. And then beginning of high school was also really difficult. Like, you don't just pop in and make close friends right away when these people have been friends since elementary, middle school. Like, yeah, I never sat alone at lunch, which was my biggest fear, actually. And now, shit, I love sitting alone eating my lunch. I prefer to eat my meals by myself, actually, now. But that's a different story. That's just called being an adult and aging. Back then, it would be absolutely devastating. So it's like, I did make friends, but it took a really long time to build that like solid friendship where I felt like, okay, people are friends with me for me, not just because I'm friends with one of their friends. Because basically she was my gateway. And she's on an episode. It hasn't been released yet. Sarah. She was my gateway friend. She helped me make a lot of my best friends that I have today. But it got to that took a certain point. So I think definitely at the beginning of that transition, I had a really hard time, especially because my freshman year of high school was actually also my sister's freshman year of college. And at the time, we shared a room. And so like we were pretty close back then. And so it was just hard. Like I felt like I needed an older sister to help get through that. And my little brother was also starting a new middle school, and he had his own host of problems that I always felt like I was responsible for taking care of and making sure he's okay and he's taken care of. And like, it would break my heart if he was struggling or having a hard time. And so I had the weight of all of that. And so that kind of played into that too. And then later on in high school, this was more towards the end of high school, but I was really, really struggling. After I quit my competitive sport, I developed an eating disorder and body dysmorphia and an extreme obsession with my body and how it looked. And it was incredibly like, it's just heartbreaking and all encompassing. And it's all I could think about. And I hated my body. And that affected so much about my life and my relationship with food. And it's something that I even struggle with now and have actually been struggling with lately. I never went to formal treatment for it. It just, I don't know exactly, like gradually I got better. But and I don't know if it was ever like noticeable for people, but it's all I could ever think about. And I'll get into that in another episode, actually, more in depth. That's not really the focus of this episode, but those really, really take a toll on your mental health. And that also played a part in spiraling me into a depression. And I also was having a hard time with like existential crises. What is life all about? I wanted more than the life that was in front of me. And it turns out I'm just not cut out for like suburbia, like marriage, kids, whatever, right away. But that's all that I was seeing, so I didn't know that there was more to life. And then that's when I discovered travel and seeing the world, and I thought, well, maybe I want to see what's out there, but I'm scared. I'm not ready. I'm scared. But it's cool to think about the fact that there's other worlds that exist in the same one that mine does, and it looks so different. Like maybe I just don't want the life that I see laid out in front of me, but maybe I do want life. And so I don't know if middle school I felt silly-sidal. I don't know if I can say that word, so I'm just going to say that little phrase. But I know in high school I certainly did. And it's so interesting because I wonder, like it makes me wonder, like did people know everything I was going through? Because I don't think, like I think at a certain point, yes, like even my teachers noticed I was really, really not well. Which honestly should have been checked into a mental hospital at that point in time. I don't know why I wasn't. It just didn't really cross my mind. Actually, no, I know because I was terrified to admit, like, I was like, I think I need to see a therapist again, which I started seeing one when I was younger. And she's still my therapist today. Actually, I need to text her. If you're listening to this, expect a message from me in a few days once I stop procrastinating messaging you. I've been procrastinating for probably like 4 months now. And we've got a lot to catch up on, sister. But anyway, yes, I need to go back to therapy. I understand I can't just talk into a microphone and spill out my problems here. But therapy is sexy. Therapy is for everybody. Therapy is super, super helpful. And it's not just for people who are going through something, and it's not for crazy people. And please, let's stop calling people crazy people, because that was my fear. And I just remember being like, nobody's ever going to love me. And I did have a boyfriend at the time, but I was like, if he finds out that like I have these mental problems, because at the time I thought that like I might potentially have bipolar disorder, it has not been diagnosable for me. I have unipolar depression, which is basically a major depressive episode. But the thing is that I just can't kick them all away. I just keep getting them. It comes back and it goes back to baseline, and then I go back down, and then I go back to baseline. But I haven't gone above this baseline, which is mania. And it would be okay if I did. I'm not saying that that would actually like be the end of my life. But at the time when I was 16 and I didn't know anyone else around me that was struggling, I was like, oh my gosh, like no one is ever going to love me. I don't love me. I'm never going to love me. And I was dealing with severe anxiety, full-blown eating disorder, body dysmorphia, and a severe depression at that point. And so I was just, and I felt very, very out of control. And that's the time when you're like trying to be applying for colleges and figuring out what's next for you. And I was like, I don't want a future. But then I also have this part of me that's like very, very strive, like get straight A's and everything. So I was applying to colleges because I knew like that's what, like I was meant to go to college. Like that did feel like it was right for me. So I did go to college. And then again at the end of college, well, hold up, I'm missing a whole diagnosis. I got in a car accident in college, and I developed PTSD from it. And I thought that I didn't know it was PTSD for a long time, because the medications I was on was actually acting to help it. And then when I went off these medications, then all these like symptoms started, and I thought, I can't have PTSD. Like I wasn't a soldier in war. Like I was like, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like nobody died. No one was severely injured, but it was a pretty major car accident. Like it could have been so much worse. I fell asleep at the wheel, totaled 2 cars, like hit other people. They were all okay, more than okay. And I broke a hand, but whatever. But anyway, it was like a very traumatic thing. And then I started dissociating from reality. And then I went to the emergency room, and my partner at the time took me, and I was like, yeah, look, you might want to shut your ears right now, but I do not want to be here. And I don't mean this hospital, but I do mean this world. And so I didn't get admitted, but I did get sent into one of those rooms where there's no cords and the TV is behind a screen. You know what I mean? A glass screen. So that was a little bit wild. But basically I kind of just got like, the woman there was just like, everyone dissociates from reality. Like she really brushed it under the rug. And I was like, I don't know about that, because my feet going into my shoes feel like trying to fit a square peg into a circular hole. And I was just like, it was really severely dissociating. I felt really out of touch with reality, and like I was in a video game. Like I felt like I was in a simulation, and I was like, I can't break out, and I felt like I wasn't in control. Like it was crazy. It felt like somebody was playing me in a video game. I don't know how else to explain it. I shouldn't say crazy, but it was just like a really intense, all-encompassing thing that was really hard for me to grasp and hard for me to admit and explain and talk to the people that were close to me, because I was scared. I was really scared. And that's one thing that mental illness has, like one of the biggest hurdles that it's been for me, is I've developed this fear that makes me, oh God, am I going to admit this on the podcast? I've developed this fear that my mental illness makes me hard to love. And that is something that I work on I was working on super intensely in therapy until I got too anxious to make appointments and then stopped. I'll be back. My therapist, I will be back, I promise. Yeah, and I say all of these things in hindsight and like kind of joke around a little bit because I have gotten through the other side and like I'm nowhere near the pits of that. It's just that I'm doing a temp check and I'm like, hey, I'm feeling a little bit wobbly. Like it's kind of like, oh, you're wobbling, you might fall. I haven't fallen into any pit. Like I'm just feeling a little bit wobbly. Maybe need to do a temp check, need to reevaluate some things. And now I have the tools to do that and the awareness. And I know that like mental illness is like physical illness, and where it's like you just have to figure out the treatment and go ahead with it and like take medicine for it if you need to take medicine for it. And so anyway, then at the end of college, I went through a super, super major depression, like the worst one ever of all. Lost a lot of people, basically went through 6 breakups at once because I was going through a like romantic partner breakup and also losing my closest friend group at the time. And that just like sent me into the biggest, deepest, darkest hole that like I would never wish on anybody. If I can describe myself at that time, it would be gray. I didn't have any energy to even spit a word out of my mouth. It is the most exhausting thing in every sense of the word. And I really don't even know how much more I can say to describe it. But there was no energy, there was no light, there was no hope. And I didn't even like see myself making it to the end of the week at a certain point. And so, somehow I crawled my way out of that one. Definitely a lot of support, a lot of therapy, a lot of prescription medication. Shout out to my Lexapro, which has been going strong for 3 years actually now. I hate to jinx it, knock on wood. Is this even real wood? I'm gonna knock on wood here. And yeah, and then I went traveling and yeah, so that's like super basic rundown and recognizing and being diagnosed with mental illnesses and how to deal with them, and why I think sensitivity and importance is sensitivity is of utmost importance, because I really wonder if in me sharing this, there's people that knew me at those points in my life that were like, oh, I had no idea. Or like, I knew something wasn't right about you, but I didn't know what. And they didn't know like just to what extent I was surviving and continuing to live my everyday life under those conditions. And it's just like, if I meet somebody that's gone through a depression or that struggles with mental illness, like I just have a lot of compassion in my heart for them, because while I don't know their lived story, I don't know exactly how they felt. Like if it's an illness I've never had, I know how hard it is. And I know how much it sucks to feel misunderstood and to feel like you need to continue to function in a society when there's people, this one I really can't wrap my brain around, but there are people out there, and I'm sure some of you listeners are some of them, that have never felt depression. Like that blows my mind because it has been such a prominent back and forth in my life. So for you, for your point of view, like, can you imagine my life where it's like so prominent in my life and it feels like something that I'm constantly trying to like work away from, not necessarily fight, but actively every day need to be doing temperature checks to be like, what am I doing that is or not supporting my mental health? Because I do have mental illness, not just because like, it's good. I don't know. But I hope that people, if you do struggle with mental health, that you feel seen and heard, and that you feel like this podcast is a place that you want to continue to come back to, because you will continue to hear stories of people that have felt it, that have been through it, that can share their stories, and that together we can work on this stigma and breaking it down. Because as much as people are performative on social media, I still will hear the same damn people say stuff that is so insensitive, or like I'm gonna give myself jokes like, you guys, we got to stop with that one because I can't make it. And I'm feeling left out. Actually, no, I never say it because I know that at like certain points in my life, that was really not an okay like joke to make, because it like was serious. So I never make that joke. I'm not necessarily offended when people do, but I do think you should never tell somebody else to. And I feel like that should just be like common sense. That's common sense, I fear. But yeah, so mental health and the awareness of it all. I hope that this episode gave you something, gave a little insight into who your host is and why I am talking about mental health. Like, I'm not just somebody that did some project or has a degree in it but has never experienced it. I'm not somebody that felt a little nervous before a test. Like, I full blown felt it. And I've been through it and I've crawled out of it. And reality is, now I don't know if this is like negative, but reality is that it's likely that I'll go through more mental health challenges again. Given that I crawled out of the last one, I will crawl out of the next one. And I hope it never comes. And I really hope it never comes, because now I have more tools, but you never know. And also, like, you never know, even though you've never struggled personally before, you never know if you could in the future. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure that nobody is immune to mental illness. And just because it doesn't plague you now doesn't mean it won't someday. And so to treat people with care and love and understanding and respect as much as you can, with the with the recognition that that someday could be you. And even if it's not, it's just human. And somebody close to you could struggle with it. And nobody wants that for somebody that they love. So thank you for tuning in this week. I hope that you had fun, even though it was just little old me. And actually, it wasn't a very fun episode. Well, I always have fun. I'm just going to yap away. Give me a mic and some headphones. Give me any excuse to yap. I'll come up with something to talk for an hour. But I fear I should stop now. So, I do have a quote that has really, really helped me. Well, I'll give you two. One that always just gets me through, like, if it's anxiety, if it's panic, if it's depression, it's all going to be okay. And one that my dad, like, always says to me is from, the Best Most Exotic Marigold Hotel. And the guy in it says, like, it'll all be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end. It can really be hard when you're in a low place to feel like, okay, well, I don't want to make it through. I don't want to make it to the okay. I just want to be done. Like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I don't want to keep fighting. And, I can't promise that more things won't happen. And I can't promise that things will get better in one way or another. But I know it's going to be okay. Because it always has been. And the last one that has really helped me, especially with anxiety, is by Nayyirah Waheed. And it's, if the ocean can calm itself, so can you. And I wrote about that, and I wrote about actually the psychological benefits of being in the ocean, which I'll link below. It's from my blog. I'll try to link some other mental health posts in my blog that I see relevant. Can't really think of some off the top of my head. But another creator that I want to point out is, well, first of all, Lila by Alexa Joe. Follow me on Instagram. Give this episode a like, rating, review. But also, another creator that I'd like to shout out is Doc_Amen, AMEN. He is a psychiatrist. He's really, really knowledgeable. He creates a lot of like short reels, very quick, easy to follow, a lot of good information. And I just feel like it's so helpful. He's just so knowledgeable. I really respect him. So that's one I would recommend. But of course, as always, share this episode if you find it helpful. Let me know what you think. Of course, my DMs are always open. Follow me on socials. I've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest. What else do I have? I put the episodes on YouTube, but it's literally just the audio with a clip or with a thumbnail so it's not actually video, especially not today. No video today because I'm sat here in my hoodie, which is also called a comfy. Basically a huge blanket hoodie and it has corgis all over it, and it's pretty dang cute. And I'm going for ultimate cozy today, and my hair's greasy because I went on a run right before this to try and clear my head, try and get some creative energy, because that's always where I think of my creative things. But of course today, blank, nothing, no ideas. So I had to just record this episode with just what I had. But actually, turns out I had a lot to say. Leave a rating. Write a review if you feel so inclined, if you really loved the episode. If you didn't love the episode, it's okay. You can keep scrolling. Like, I'm not hurt. Just keep going. Rating, it takes literally less than 2 seconds. And on whatever platform that you listen to, go to all the platforms. Rate them on all of them. Go for it. Be an overachiever today. Yeah. But yeah, please help me, because it's just like, I can't spread this message alone. And if it means something to you, if it resonates with you, if the Lila movement feels like something that moves inside of you, then please let me know. Let your people know. Share it on social. Follow. Do what you can to help, because I just want to help more people. I want more people to feel seen in whatever that they're going through, and in this stuff that makes life feel like it's worth living, and with recognition of the times that really, really don't, especially everything that I talked about in today's episode. Yeah, guys, that's what I got.